Hey y'all, I'm Jan. Today we're going to make our chicken broth for our chicken dressing. And this will be my holiday dressing the way I make it for Thanksgiving. In my boiler here, I've got 3 chicken legs, drumsticks. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these on to boil. I'm going to add, this is a quart of water. Now normally I would add only water to this, but since I only have 3 drumsticks, I'm not sure it's going to be enough. So I'm going to add 8 cups or 2 quarts of water. I'm probably going to add 4 more cups. And I'm going to add 2 cups of chicken broth. Now, normally I use this to make my chicken broth for my dressing. But since I only have 3 pieces of chicken, I'm just not sure if it will be flavorful enough. So we're going to add a little bit more to it. And then that way I can use the rest of this chicken broth for something else. Two cups. There we go. The last time I made dressing and made the video for y'all, I took the celery, I cut it into chunks, and I put it in the freezer. Normally I would never freeze celery, but since I only want the flavor out of this, it doesn't matter that these are frozen. So this is the equivalent of not quite 2 whole sticks of celery. We'll say, 1 2/3. Gonna put them in there. Have an entire onion. Cut that in half in the boiler. We're only wanting the broth, and then we're going to use the chicken to go into our dressing. Gonna add some pepper, black pepper. A little garlic powder. Not a lot, just a little bit. It's about 1/4 of a teaspoon. We're gonna add some onion powder, probably an entire teaspoon. You want to get your broth really flavorful. I hope if you've never made dressing before, you will make it from this video. I think you surprise yourself. Salt. Now we added 2 cups of low sodium chicken broth into this, so I'm going to use less salt than I normally would, since that does have some salt in it. We'll say about a teaspoon, and we'll check it later to see how it tastes. I'm going to fill this back up. So a total of 12 cups of water and 2 cups of chicken broth in here. I'm going to put this on to boil. I'm going to turn it down to a simmer, and I'm going to let it simmer for at least an hour. I'll just keep checking the flavor of the broth. But this will give us 2 parts. This will give us the broth we need for the dressing, and it will give us the chicken to go in the dressing. So I will see y'all back when this is all done. Oh, also, I'm going to make my cornbread today. I've already made that video, so I doubt y'all want to see me make it again. So use the cornbread video and this video, and you want to do this at least 2 days before you're going to make your dressing. That gives you time to get your broth done, get your chicken ready for your dressing, and get your cornbread ready for your dressing, because your cornbread needs to dry out. So I will see y'all when this is finished. And that's what you want it to look like. It came to a rolling boil in about, I don't know, 7 or 8 minutes. And I turned it down to in between medium and low. And I'm probably going to turn it on down to low. All I want it to do is simmer and cook the chicken through. We don't want the chicken, rubbery. We want the chicken, to be tender and soft. So it'll simmer like that for about an hour, and then we'll strain all this through a sieve. All this will go to the trash. The chicken we will shred for the dressing, and then we got all this yummy broth that we'll use for the dressing, and something else. We'll jar it up. So, okay, I just want to show y'all what it's supposed to look like. I'll be back. And there we go, y'all. That's what we ended up with. This probably would have been full, but I spilt a lot because there was more in the bowl than I thought when I poured it through a sieve. Got our chicken in here. I'm going to shred this tomorrow, but I wanted to go ahead and get that broth in the jars. I'm going to put these in the refrigerator, and then tomorrow we'll make our dressing, and we'll use probably, I'd say 3 cups out of one of those. I'll start with the little one first, but now we've got more chicken broth for other good meals. So, okay, I'll see y'all tomorrow for our dressing. It's our cornbread for our dressing. See if I can do this without making a mess. Oh, come on. Same spot every time. I'm going to have to oil this bad boy again and get it back right. Anyway, there's our cornbread. Now I'm going to let this cool down enough where I can touch it, and I'm going to crumble it all into pieces, put it in a bowl, and let it sit here and dry all the way out. We need it to dry out so it can absorb the chicken broth for the dressing. Now remember, when you make your cornbread, you want to make sure you get this dry part off. See that? That's the bottom. If you'll bake your cornbread for only, say, 18 or 19 minutes, this will come right off. It's just falling off for me, really. Okay, you want to get these pieces out. See, that top part is fine, so we're going to leave it. Take that little bit out. This only takes a minute. But like I said, if you'll bake your cornbread for only, about 19 minutes, and probably even 20 minutes, the crust of it will just peel right off for you. So that's just peeling off. Makes it so much easier. You might have a little cushion right there at the back. Just pick it off with your finger. And then you need to set this somewhere where it can air out. You know, as much as we want our cornbread to be moist to make dressing, you need this to dry all the way back out so it will absorb your chicken broth. Okay, now onto the onions and the celery. That's how much onion you want for your dressing. That's definitely a cup, a little over a cup, probably a cup and a half. You can dice it up much smaller than this. If you do, you'll never know the onion is in there because it's cooked down until it's translucent anyway. But even if you don't like onion, you gotta trust me that you gotta have onion in your dressing. It won't taste right if it's not in there. You can get you one of those chopper things. Heck, I got one like 4 years ago, paid $25 for it, and I've used it once. Convinced I had to have it because I do so much chopping. And then in the amount of time it takes me to get that thing out and then hook whichever attachment up I need and then chop the stuff, I can just chop it by hand. So, but anyway, you definitely want, I'd say a large or just a medium size. You want the whole onion and like 2 whole ribs of celery diced. Dice them really small. A lot of years I wouldn't eat dressing because I thought all I was going to taste was celery. I have never tasted celery in dressing, but you'll know it if it's not in there. It's not going to taste right. So anyway, that's our onion. Now back to the task at hand. Now we're going to saute our onions. You want at least 2 tablespoons of butter because this is a lot of onion. Saute your onion and your celery until it's translucent. That's all you want. You don't want to cook it down. You don't want it to get brown. Just saute until it's translucent. Now, this is for a 9 by 13 size pan of dressing. If you're doing 8 by 8, you could probably use about half of this onion. But the onion is really important. Y'all see, I don't even have it all diced up good enough. That's all right. Again, saute this or just cook it down until it's translucent. Takes, I don't know, 7-8 minutes. I'm gonna get the celery put in here. We'll get this on the stove, get the celery put in, and then I'm going to crush up our crackers. You need 1 sleeve. Sleeve of saltine crackers. You just gotta trust me. This adds so much to the flavor. It's kind of hard to describe. I thought it was silly the first time I heard it, and then I tried it. And I haven't made my dressing without the saltine since. If you're doing an 8 by 8 size, just use half of this. But for 9 by 13, use the whole thing. Just crush it all the way up. Next, you're going to take 3 pieces of bread. 1, 2, 3. And you're going to shred them. Shred them into your bowl. Just sit there and tear them into tiny pieces. And then as soon as our onions are translucent, we're going to mix this all together, add our spices, and get it in the oven. And then we'll make our gravy. Cornbread in the bowl. Here's our crackers all crushed up. Bread and cornbread mixed up. So now let me grab our onions. Onion and celery. Okay, so our homemade cornbread, our 3 slices of shredded bread, a pack of crushed saltine crackers, our sauteed onion and celery. Now our chicken. Remember, we made a homemade chicken broth. Okay, we grab our seasonings and our chicken broth. Okay, our chicken broth we made. So open our big quart. If I can get it open, that is. Used a little over half so far. Let's see. These more. I can show you this close up. Do you see how moist that's getting? That's why you want the entire thing. You don't want it pooling in the bottom, but you want every bit of this moist because we're going to let this sit here for about 30 minutes to give our cornbread, our crackers, and our bread time to absorb that chicken broth. So you don't want a wet, soupy mess, but you definitely want to be able to see the wetness in it. And then you let it sit for 30 minutes, and then it goes into the oven. So I think this still needs a little bit more, because this is a lot of dressing. Yep, I still see some dry pieces over here, okay. So we're going to use the rest of this. So this is a whole quart, plus this was about 2/3 of the way full. Now then, that looks perfect. So you see it looks a little wet, like you may think you put too much broth in there. You didn't. I promise you didn't. You don't want any wetter than this, but you want it to look like this once you get all the broth mixed in. Because I promise you in 30 minutes, it's not going to look like this. Now, I need to taste this before I add salt. Because remember, we made our broth. Oh, wow. I don't need a drop of salt. That's perfect. 1 second, let me wash my hands. Okay. Sage. We're going to add 2 teaspoons. And I mean only. No. We're going to add a teaspoon. Just like one kind of heaping. A little sage goes a long way. And I know a lot of y'all are probably like me. You don't like a lot of sage, so you opt for poultry seasoning. However, poultry seasoning also has sage in it. It's just got a lot of other stuff too. So if you'd prefer your poultry seasoning, I'd probably add 2 teaspoons. Because again, this is going to be a 9 by 13. You want to taste the sage a little. I mean, it's not going to be dressing without that flavor. So we're going to add 1 teaspoon of sage and 1 teaspoon of poultry seasoning. Then I'm going to add some black pepper. That's to taste. It definitely needs it. You can add a 1/4 teaspoon if you're not a fan of pepper, but it really needs the pepper. Now we're going to mix this all together. Now then, let's taste it again. It's interesting, I really can't taste the sage. I do know this is a lot, but I don't want to overdo it on the sage. Taste it again. Okay. We'll add just another sprinkle. I'd say that's a 1/4 teaspoon. Because you want to do this and you want to taste this. Yes, I know none of this is cooked. Actually, it's all cooked. It's just cold. But you want to do your tasting of your dressing always before you bake it. And always before you add your egg. Because if you know this is not quite done, we still got to add our 2 eggs to it and some oil. Okay, another spoon. Try it again. Okay, now that's starting to taste like dressing. And y'all know what? Since I got them giant eggs, I'm just going to use 1 egg. 1 giant double yolk egg. And then I'm going to add in about 3 tablespoons of veg oil. And I'm going to let this sit here for 30 minutes. And then we'll come back and we're going to put it in the pan, in the dish, and bake it. With our egg. 1, 2, 3. Now I realize this is a meal of endearment. This takes some time. You got to first make your cornbread, and if you're so inclined, make your broth. And you got to do that, you know, at least a day prior, so your cornbread can dry back out. And you want to get your, you know, your broth right. But I'll tell you, the first time you ever make this from scratch is such a good feeling, especially when it actually tastes good and people like it. My first dressing and my first turkey are there are two things I will never forget making for the first time, and that's been, well, actually I didn't make dressing until about 15 years ago, but my first turkey was about 25 years ago. And it was so juicy, and it was still juicy 2 days later. And I mean, it was surprising even to me, so. But it taught me that you can have juicy turkey. And I'm going to make y'all a turkey here shortly, too. I know I'm making noise with the spoon. Y'all don't chew me out. Okay. I'm going to just stick a big plate over this. I'm going to let it sit right here on the counter for 30 minutes. And you'll see all this liquid will suddenly vanish when I turn this camera back on. And then we're going to put it in the oven. Make sure you grease your 9x13. In we go. Now then, I'm going to put some tin foil over this, and I'm just going to let it sit here for this broth to absorb. I was going to leave it sitting in the bowl, but it's bugging me. I want to get these dishes washed. And then I can just throw this in the oven and stuff my face after without having to worry about cleaning up a bunch of dishes. So I'm going to get them done now. Nope. Can't have no mess right there on the corner. Darn it, I did it again. Okay. So again, let your dressing sit there for 30 minutes. I'm going to turn this back on to show y'all, but you'll see the broth just kind of evaporated, which is what you want. You want it to absorb into all the bread. Then it's going to go in a 350 degree preheated oven, anywhere from 30 minutes to 1 hour. It shouldn't take an hour, but if you accidentally put too much broth, that's not a problem. Just cook it longer. If it takes you an hour, it takes you an hour. It's not going to hurt it. And I think a lot of people think they destroy dressings if they cook them for too long. No, you won't. Just make sure you do not cover it, because you'll steam it and all your broth will stay in here. You want this to dry out. You'll see bubbling all the way around the edges. I'll show y'all, but you don't want to overcook it, because you still want this to be moist. Dry dressing isn't good either. So anyway, I'll be back to show y'all right before I put this in the oven. Now then, you can see a lot of our liquid has absorbed. It's actually been about, I don't know, 15, maybe 20 minutes. Going in the oven now, 350 from anywhere to 30 to 45 minutes. I think it'll be ready in 30. See y'all then. And there we go, y'all. Homemade cornbread dressing with chicken. The first bit went to my friend. I told him a couple of days ago that I was about to make this, and he's been waiting impatiently. Let me get me a little bit out. Don't know if y'all can tell how moist this is. Don't know if it's going to show up. And you absolutely want a moist dressing. You obviously don't want it wet, but you still want it to be moist when it comes out of the oven. As for the gravy, this is just McCormick turkey gravy seasoning mix with a cup of water. The way I would normally make gravy for this during the holidays, when I open my turkey to bake it, I take the neck out and I put it in a couple of cups of water and boil it for about 45 minutes. And then I use that water to make my homemade gravy, which I also add boiled egg into. That's the way I've always had it. So whenever I do bake my turkey for y'all, I'll show you how I make my legit gravy. I'm going to be honest, I've already tasted this dressing. It doesn't need any gravy, but I'm going to put a little bit right here, because I know some of y'all wanted to actually see the gravy. So this is piping hot. Yeah. At least it didn't fall on the counter or the floor. Oh. That might be one of the best ones I've ever made. Let's get some chicken. I mean, this is legit a meal in itself. There's nothing, you can't possibly go wrong making homemade dressing. Y'all attempt this. While I realize it takes some time, you're only going to make it once or twice a year, and to see the look on your family members' faces or your friends when they taste it, that's all I need. I love cooking things that make people happy. This is phenomenal. I know what I'm going to be eating for the next week. And also, you can make this in advance and freeze it. You can also, you know, like I told y'all before, you want to make your cornbread a couple of days, or at least a day in advance, to give your cornbread time to dry out. You know, and if you're making chicken broth from scratch, you want to do that at least a day before too. Yeah, I highly recommend starting this 2 days prior. And if you want to, the day before, you can actually mix all this together. Get it all completely ready in a bowl. Just don't add your broth. And the reason being, whether you use homemade or whether you use store-bought broth, it's quite salty. And if you mix it all up and add the broth in and put it in the refrigerator and let it sit all night and half of the next day until you get ready to bake it, it will be so salty you can't. I learned that from experience. So yeah, if you want to make this all the day before your holiday meal and then just add the broth to it that morning, just don't forget to let it sit there for about 30 minutes to give all your cornbread, your bread, and your crackers time to absorb that moisture, and then bake it. This baked for about right at 45 minutes, and it's perfect. It's still moist. It's delicious. It doesn't taste like a bread loaf full of sage. I truly believe a little sage goes a long way. Y'all please give this a try. You won't regret it. I truly appreciate y'all being here. I'll put the full recipe of everything down in the description underneath the video. I'll link my cornbread recipe to this video. And y'all let me know if you try this out. I truly appreciate y'all being here. And I hope you have an awesome week. Thank you.